Data leak prevention, or DLP, refers to a system or a process by which you can detect and potentially prevent sensitive data from being exfiltrated out of your network. DLP solutions have the ability to look for certain strings, certain kinds of data, and even certain file types that are transiting your network boundaries or being copied from individual hosts onto USB drives. What they're looking for here is data actually migrating out of your network, be it through network channels, USB channels, whatever the case may be. And so what it does is it looks at data in use, so data on a host. Is that data allowed to be interacted with or used in the manner that it's being used in right now? Data in motion or data in transit, data that's crossing the network boundaries or across whatever sensors you have, is that supposed to be transiting the network? Is that supposed to be crossing the network perimeter? And it'll also look at data at rest, so data that is sitting on a file server or some other type of data storage device. Data leakage incidents typically occur when you have sensitive data that is being disclosed to an unauthorized third party, either by malicious intent, the person intended to do it, or by inadvertent mistake. And by sensitive data, we could mean privacy-related data, health information, intellectual property, proprietary information, credit card data, board discussions, mergers and acquisitions. There's a lot of sensitive data out there, and it's kind of incumbent upon each organization to define what is sensitive to your organization and what isn't. But once you do that, that forms the foundation of a DLP program. You really have to understand what is sensitive data and what isn't sensitive. Some good case examples of this. There are several cases from within the financial sector of people who took customer lists. So, I'm a financial trader. I manage a bunch of private high net worth clients. And when I leave the firm and go start up my own firm, I'm going to take that customer list with me, all those names, email addresses, phone numbers, addresses. I'm going to take that with me when I go to my new company. Now, somebody might say that is immoral. You shouldn't be taking the data to your new company with you. Trust but verify on your employees says that, all right, well, we're going to monitor that employee, all our employees, and make sure that they're not pulling that type of data out to the network, like emailing it to themselves, copying it up to a Dropbox account, or putting in a zip file and posting it to a web server, or writing it to a USB drive. And there are plenty of cases of this within the financial world. There was one interesting one within the hotel industry, where customer lists were being moved from one hotel chain to the other through one employee who was making a move. And so this is not just a insider, employee issue. DLP can also detect when data breaches are occurring and you've got an attacker inside the network who is actively trying to pull out customer data or payment card data. 3 different methods for doing data leakage protection. Network-based DLP is where you have a sensor at the boundary or the gateway of your network, and it's constantly looking at network traffic regardless of protocol. So it's looking at FTP data, social media, web-based, instant messaging, peer-to-peer applications. It's looking at various connectivity methods to see if there is data transiting that gateway that should not be allowed to be transmitted. Host-based DLP is looking for, usually it's installed on laptops, mobile devices, but it's looking for data on that host being copied to a USB drive, perhaps a smartphone or some other type of local media. Could even be a CD-ROM drive. And so you have host-based DLP solutions that look at just the laptop and how could we get data off of there. Then you have discovery DLP, and these are on-demand solutions where you run them and they are intended to find information, this sensitive information, out on common places like file servers. DLP software, at its root, it's a text matching search engine. So you provide patterns to the DLP engine. The DLP engine will take those patterns and look across whatever it is monitoring for matches. When it sees those patterns, it will take appropriate action. So you can define a DLP policy that defines what is it being, or what is being searched for. Are we looking for social security numbers? Are we looking for credit card numbers? Are we looking for document markings like perhaps we've have a data classification program and we've said, all right, we've got sensitive data, public data, and absolutely confidential, do not disclose data. Well, if all of our data is marked, then we can look through PDF files, Word documents for those particular strings, and we can more easily detect that type of information going out the network. So I define what should be searched for. Next, I define what the context is that would trigger a violation. So under what circumstances would social security numbers be a violation? Well, it could be when we are copying more than 10 social security numbers to a non-company-owned site, like Pastebin or something like that, or Gmail. So you can define destinations, and you can also define thresholds that say, one social security number, that's okay. 2 social security numbers, that's okay. But 3 or more, that constitutes a policy violation. And that allows you to kind of granularly set what your users are and aren't able to do. So this would allow perhaps somebody in HR to be able to communicate with an employee about their employee records because it just contained their IP address. That wouldn't flag a DLP alert. But if I, as the HR person, decided to email my entire employee database with names, email addresses, social security numbers, and all that, if I did a text dump of that and then tried to email it to myself, that would flag as a violation on DLP. The last thing you should set within your policy is how should it be handled? What should I do about it? Should I just report the fact that something occurred, or do I need to proactively block it and prevent it from going out? You can do other things, such as sending the email back and forcing it to be encrypted, or sending it to a privacy and security mailbox so that you're aware of these violations. It's all very granular in what you can do here. And what I've seen companies do is usually define, one, what data is important to them. What do they really want to catch with this? And I've seen policies set up around social security numbers, data markings. I've even seen policies set up on encrypted file types, like encrypted RAR files or encrypted zip files. And DLP will flag on the presence of those files as well. Doesn't matter what's inside of it, but it will flag on that. And then they decide, all right, what constitutes a violation? And it's usually 3 or more records. Some places I've seen 10 or more, either payment card, credit card numbers, or social security numbers. It's usually rare that you'll see an implementation that has 1 as its trigger point. Because frequently the use cases for sending 1 social security number occur much more frequently than somebody trying to exfiltrate your customer database 1 record at a time. Although that is an interesting way to get around DLP if you're into that sort of thing. Not that I'd recommend that. For DLP implementation, here's a great chart that lays out the different kinds of DLP services that are available to you and what types of data it's checking. So usually there will be some type of DLP portal or enforcement server or management interface. That's here on the left. And then you can see that you can do look for data in motion through the network-based DLP approach. You can look for data in use through some type of endpoint approach or host-based DLP. And data at rest, you can look at that from a look at your file servers or common areas where data might be aggregated and look through that for sensitive data as well. And the last point up here, DLP as a control, you can have this set up on your email server to monitor outbound email connections as well, such that you're looking for markings, you're looking for presence of data, and then you can take appropriate action on that. Some considerations. So first and foremost, because you're doing monitoring, there are legal conditions or considerations that you ought to think about. Always consult with your legal service team before implementing DLP. You don't want to have or create privacy violations as a result of this. If you already have a monitoring program in place to do security monitoring, you're probably okay. But again, from a privacy standpoint, you might want to look at that. And certainly if you're doing DLP on an international scale, you might want to consider that there might be more restrictive privacy laws dealing with international organizations than if you were just dealing with a U.S. company. In fact, I've worked with an international finance company who had implemented DLP, and what they wanted was a global corporate-wide DLP, and they couldn't do it because of the privacy restrictions. So what they had to do was have a U.S.-based implementation for DLP that was looking at the U.S. Network only. They had another implementation in Europe that was looking at just the Europe locations. And then they had an open policy. They didn't have DLP in any of the other regions just because of the mix of privacy laws. They didn't know what to do. And so they had different implementations of DLP based on where they were in the world just because of those privacy concerns. From an operational standpoint, just to understand that you will probably have large amounts of data that have to be parsed through. If you can have automated analysis on this, great. But I've worked with companies also that once a week a DLP report gets kicked out and somebody has to go through that manually and see if there are any policy violations. Not the most effective way of doing it, but they had fine-tuned their rule set that if it was in that list, it was probably going to be a violation. If you operate DLP in prevention mode, where you're actively blocking transmission of data, just recognize that you might prevent legitimate data from being delivered. And so this is the trade-off of intrusion detection versus intrusion prevention. Do you want to block it or do you want to allow it and be notified after the fact? It's a policy decision for each organization to make. And then the DLP requires constant attention in terms of maintaining the policies that you have in place to detect things, prioritizing data types, and then, of course, managing the alerts from it as well.